This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube. I just finished watching the Jesse the Body Ventura interview with Bill Simmons, who I guess was one of the producers of the Netflix Vince McMahon series. We've been hearing quotes from this interview, and it's Jesse's most recent interview. He was on it seemingly to plug his WWE return. It's happening next week. But let me go over this. In some ways, this was not a good interview because, especially for the last 20-ish minutes, he really goes into how he could have beat Donald Trump and become president. Let's face the facts here. He hasn't won an election since 98. He also one thing that actually pissed me off to hear in this is he talks about being anti two parties in this last 15 to 20 minutes, which I'll warn you guys now, there's nothing really interesting in the last 15 to 20 minutes because he just contradicts himself. He says he's anti two party system and all that. He backed Harris. He backed Kamala Harris. So I guess now that Kamala lost, he can go back to being anti two party system. He has said so many times since 98 that he's going to run for president, or he could run, but he doesn't. And it's like, put up or shut up at some point. I don't want to hear you talk about it for 15 minutes if you're never going to do it. I just don't want to hear it. And I don't honestly think, I could honestly see one of the next potential candidates being Elon Musk, to be honest, as one of the next presidents, the way things are going, even though he's mysteriously made zero comments about the drone situation happening, not just in the US, but in the world right now. I am interviewing some people today from New Jersey that are scientists that have been studying the drone situation, but I won't digress into that. Let's go through the interesting part about it. Here's the good part about it. They're obviously paying him a lot. He actually said the money is adequate for it. But it's clear they're paying him a lot because it's either that and probably a combination. He actually, if you get right down to it, he's a wrestling person and he seems very happy. This is the happiest I've seen him in an interview forever, and I've seen all of his interviews. I am a fan of him somewhat. I just don't like his back and forth political stuff or saying he's going to do something that he's not going to do and wasting time talking about that. But as far as a commentator, he might be my favorite commentator of all time. Him and Heenan would definitely be up there. As a heel, I gotta like the two best heel commentators by far, hands down. But yeah, he seems very excited about it. He didn't mention one current wrestler in all of this. He did not mention one current wrestler. So that's going to be the interesting thing. Has he even because when he was a commentator before, he was just out of the wrestling business, and he had been in the wrestling business for probably at least 10 years, I would say. Maybe a little less than 10 years. But he was always around wrestling. Now he'll be going back into commentary, which might only be one match. They haven't said how many matches he's going to commentate, but he clearly hasn't watched the product at all because he made absolutely no references to the current product. The closest reference he made to the current product was talking about a recent match between The Rock and Steve Austin, which I'm not exactly sure what WrestleMania that was. I know it happened, I think, at two of them. One of you guys can tell me in the comments. But that was a long time ago. That was over 20 years ago. And that was the most modern wrestling reference he made, other than he said there's going to be no ramp and no fancy lights at this, which I think would be cool to go back to that version because I think wrestling is overproduced, but I'll believe it when I see it. He spent a lot of this interview, and this makes me think that people involved in the current WWE regime possibly don't like McMahon. more than possibly don't like McMahon and try and distance themselves from McMahon, and maybe see the entertainment company he's going to make as competition, because Jesse spent a good amount of time in this interview taking shots at Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon is probably the wrestling personality he talked about in this interview, other than Hogan, the most. He was talking about how he had to sue Vince McMahon, how Vince McMahon refused to do the union. The same story we've been hearing, honestly, forever about the union, and I think is old news by now. He also took a lot of shots at Hogan, and while I was watching this, it's interesting that they're not using Hogan on Saturday night's main event, since Hogan and Jesse Ventura were like the two main people I think people remember synonymously with Saturday night's main event. And Hogan is currently under a 5-year WWE contract. Hogan just said that on Logan Paul. So it's interesting that at least up to this point, they haven't mentioned Hogan, because the event at the Nassau Coliseum is not sold out yet, where you would think if Hogan was mentioned, it might boost ticket sales and interest. Because as I said, as far as the main event of Kevin Owens against Cody Rhodes, that's a flat main event. Nobody thinks Kevin Owens is going to win. And if you look at the classic battles in Saturday Night Main Event, it was the larger than life. It was always Hogan against like the big boss man, or the larger than life personalities, or Hogan and Warrior. I'm going to review this in a second because WWE just posted it and I reviewed it. Hogan against Warrior and the Genius. Hogan with Warrior against the Genius and Perfect. Like, those are like crazy characters. So we're going to Cody Rhodes against the fat guy in the t-shirt for the main event. A very plain looking, unsuperhuman looking guy. So it's like, as far as the actual match as the main event itself, it's a crap main event as far as mainstream interest. The main reason to watch it, I think, is for Jesse's commentary and to see what setup they're going to use, if it is going to be an old school setup. He talked a lot about his friendship with Arnold. That was another thing that came up about McMahon, that McMahon, he left McMahon when he went to do the Running Man with Arnold, and he had done the negotiations for his contract renewal with McMahon after he already had the Running Man movie gig locked in. So yeah, I mean, he was taking. There was so many shots at McMahon in this. It was clear that you'd have to think because he's under contract. He did say for four shows in 2000. They're going to be done quarterly. So I don't know if there's 100% 4 shows in 2025. But there's 4 shows at least. One in December, one in January, and then at least 2 or 3 other of these specials. But yeah, he talked about Hogan being very controlling. He made it seem like his character in Predator. I mean, there was a famous line in it, but he made it seem like his character in Predator was the most important character other than Arnold. He mentioned that his character was the only character that got a funeral. I'll be honest, I've never really watched Predator. I've only seen clips of it. It hasn't really interested me. I saw Running Man. It's not one of Arnold's better movies, but good. I think it's cool that Jesse had the job. He also took shots at he took a big shot at Eric Bischoff and Hogan for getting him fired from WCW. He claimed in this that he helped Eric Bischoff get his executive vice president job, and then Bischoff got Hogan hired after that, and then they fired Jesse. Which I do believe that. I do believe that Hogan probably got him fired. They clearly have never liked each other. And to Bischoff, I understand Bischoff's perspective. Wrestling's a cutthroat business. And although Jesse is one of the best commentators of all time, Hogan was worth more. But yeah, overall, as I said, other than he seemed really happy in this, so he's clearly getting a lot of money. He seems to be happy. Oh, the other thing, he kept talking about hell freezing over. Hell freezing over, because he said he'd never go back to work for WWE. He was a guest referee since he left. He did go back to work for McMahon. First of all, he was an XFL contracted commentator for McMahon, which nobody watched because it was a flop and everybody forgets. He was a guest referee, I think, at a SummerSlam, and he was a guest host. So for him, I know he wanted to bury McMahon throughout this whole thing, but he was actually under contract with McMahon for the XFL, did the big SummerSlam thing, and was a guest host in between when he left due to his initial fight with Vince McMahon and now. So I wouldn't say hell froze over. I think it's a matter of he was offered the right amount of money. He didn't comment at all on this regarding McMahon, any of the lawsuit stuff with McMahon. He didn't comment whatsoever on this. So you would have to say that it was somewhat probably regulated by WWE, because that would be a question most people would want to know from Jesse Ventura, what he thinks of all those accusations. And none of that was brought up. And he also said WWE could never control him. They couldn't control him back then. They're not going to be able to control him now. Who knows? I'll get into your questions, though. As I said, my favorite Arnold movie, it's probably Pumping Iron by far. I also like True Lies and Conan. But other than those, I can't honestly say I'm a big fan of the Arnold movies. I never really liked Terminator. Someone gave me a DVD of Twins to rewatch. I didn't like that. The one where he got pregnant, I'd rather forget. Last Action Hero, I'd rather forget. Punk, I would say Punk is a bigger star than Cody. I would say Punk and Roman, I would say. You're entitled to your opinion, but I would say, I agree that it's madness that they have Rhodes against Owens. That's just that's like a mid-card match. Like, that's not a Saturday night's main event match. Jesse in Major League 2. He was in Major League 2. I think I'd have to watch that. Truth Hunter, I think it's a matter that Vince McMahon probably didn't want to pay Jesse as much as whatever he's getting paid now. And they probably wanted to lock him up at this point so AEW doesn't use him for anything. Smash that like button. I agree with that. Jesse does always say the same stories the whole interview, and that's what I said. There wasn't the main thing that was new about it was nice to see him happy, but there was nothing, like, he said the same thing. We'll go back into it. His favorite opponent is Tito Santana. He says that every freaking interview. By the way, I was supposed to interview Jesse once during COVID. He agreed to a price of $5,000 through whatever dork talent guy represented him at the time. And then after I announced it, they changed the price to a higher price. And I'm like, you can't do that. So I also hold a grudge with him over that, because it's like, I was a huge fan of yours. I guarantee you this Bill Simmons guy didn't pay him a cent. And other people, I'm sure he's done interviews and not got any money. I thought that was a more than fair price for a YouTube interview. And then he wanted more money. I'm not sure if that was him or his agent. But I mean, it's hard enough to make $5,000 back. At that time, he wasn't doing a lot of interviews, so I thought it could have been made back. But then to change it to more, it's like, I'm just an individual. Like, whatever. I lost respect for him over that. Changing a deal. This is why I don't think he's a man of his word anymore. He changed that deal with me. That's my direct. No one's ever actually done that to me. In all of my shoot interview deals, nobody has ever changed a deal on me, ever, after agreeing to a deal, other than Jesse Ventura. And saying back in this interview he doesn't support the two-party system, when just a little bit ago he was putting over Harris. That was bizarre. Also, it was brought up in this that he supported Trump for his first run, and he tried to brush that off like it didn't happen. So I don't know. And I don't know if he publicly supported it, but there was some comment in this that Bill said that he brought up that Jesse didn't always think Trump would be bad. And Jesse brought it up, brushed it off like he never said that. They should bring back the blue steel cage, but honestly, I'm sick of seeing cage matches with no blood. Apparently, I don't know if the Drew McIntyre against Punk one was accidental or not, but like they've had way too many cage matches where instead of blood, they have people jumping off the cage and getting serious injuries. Jesse's comment from Predator is the best known thing from Predator. He also said he was there when Jean-Claude Van Damme was still going to play the Predator. He said none of them knew what the Predator was going to look like until they saw the movie, since Van Damme was off the set. He also said that Cyndi Lauper, and this was a news story for someone that said he always tells the same story. He said that Cyndi Lauper gave him his first hair dye job and then brought him out on stage at a concert. Vince McMahon saw it, and it was based off of that they asked him to be a heel commentator because Vince thought Jesse looked cool with the punk rock, multiple colored dyed hair. Yeah, he did support Harris. Look it up, EC2. He definitely did, 100%. Congratulations, Handsome Grim. I'll be right back with my review of this Saturday night main event match that WWE just posted. Hogan and Warrior against my old friend, the Genius, and Kurt Hennig, one of my favorite wrestlers. This was what I did enjoy this trip back in memory lane, so we'll get into it.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot